we come to the gospel, identity is received. Identity is not what I do, what I say about myself, what you say of me, what you think of me. Identity is I'm a son or I'm a daughter of Jesus Christ, and in him I have security and peace and rest. And I feel like that's the golden nugget. That's the opportunity for the church, is to be able to say, yep, I hear you. I respect you. I hear what you're saying. Let me talk to you about a goalpost that'll never move.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Other 6 Days podcast, where we chat about life outside of Sundays and what it means to live from our gatherings, not just for them. And so I'm your host, CJ McFadden, and here again with Pastor Ricky Jenkins. And today we have a very special guest for you with us, and his name is Caleb Kaltenbach.
Woohoo!
Welcome,
Drum
Caleb.
roll.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's always great to be here. It's great to be in the presence of CJ and Ricky.
Yeah.
And here's your $20.
There you go. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Caleb's research pastor at Shepherd Church in Los Angeles, California, and founder of the Messy Grace Group, where he helps churches love and foster community with the LGBTQ individuals without sacrificing theological convictions. Caleb's author of multiple books that share his story and help others navigate these complex issues. So on today's podcast, we're going to dive into some questions and conversations surrounding the LGBTQ community, but ultimately we're here to help us all discover what it means to show up well, individually, corporately, as well as a community for the gospel in light of what Jesus has called us to.
So can I add something, CJ, if that's okay?
Yeah.
If the two of you want to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, we can do that as well.
Throw that in there somewhere.
Well, we talk about struggle and how many NFL teams are struggling against them now. So, especially the 49ers.
Oh, man, my wife would just jump on your face. So my boy, April's a longtime 49er fan.
Yeah.
Like it's real. It's serious.
Yeah.
But my boys love Patrick Mahomes because he looks cool. And he actually happens to be playing when they are watching a Super Bowl. So, and my boys are biracial too. So like they think they look like him. So it's just a thing. So April would cut you right now.
Yep. There you go. There you go. Yep. She's a better person than I am.
Yeah,
I do know that.
Yeah.
Prettier too.
Yeah. As is your brother.
Well, typically on our podcast, we especially when we're addressing heavier topics, we like to start off with something a little bit on the lighter side. So usually me and Ricky are talking food, but today we thought it might be apropos or fun to share what you think might be the greatest superpower ever. We'll get Ricky's take too as well.
Okay. Well, I can definitely think of the creepiest superpower ever.
All right, let's do that.
Invisibility. I mean, that's got to be one.
It's got to be pretty creepy.
Honestly, I think strength would probably be the greatest. Some people say flying.
Yeah.
But
flying without strength, what are you even going to do?
Yeah, and who says how fast you're going to move? If I fly the same rate that I walk, it's useless.
Like slow-mo flying?
Yeah. It's basically going to be...
Like, what if you could only fly 8 miles an hour?
I never thought of that. Oh, that's a useless superpower,
This
right?
is true.
Yeah, you got to have... You got to have some gasoline for those jets, and I don't think I have that.
So you say strength?
Yeah,
I
like that. What about you, Ricky?
Strength is a good one, and I want to mess with that invisibility thing. It's caused me issues for decades with superheroes, because the tension is you can be invisible, but can your clothes be invisible too? So you just have I think if you truly have it makes no sense for clothes to be able to be invisible too. Right. So for your superpower, you got to be naked everywhere.
Yep.
So what do you do when it's cold?
Yeah.
What do you do when it's real hot? Like it's just like you can't even constitute any kind of viable benefit for invisibility.
No, and you couldn't be invisible in the snow because they see your footprints.
That's exactly right.
They might see the vibrations from the shivers. If it's too cold, you know what I mean? It's just
like the condensation on the breath.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point.
And if it's hot, if you're sweating,
right?
Do they just see walking drips?
Right. And does invisibility take your sound away? I don't think so. So they can hear you breathing and sneezing and farting and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever see Invisible Man, the movie? The latest one, the remake.
The H.G. Wells version?
No, the latest one. Oh, it came out in 2020, right before the world shut down. But it is creepy. It is scary. But you see some of that because he's there, but then you'll see him blow in the cold air.
Yeah.
And then other people will just be like, "Oh, what was that? What was that? Oh, it's the invisible guy." Like, and he would just hang out in his wife's house in the attic. Because I guess that's what you do when you're invisible. That's what he would do. That's what creepy. He did. It's like the typical ghost movie. You know, you die and you wait in an attic or a basement for an accountant to buy the house.
Right.
And to solve your murder.
You're just set up, though, as the invisible power guy to be psychotic. Yeah. Because you see everything. And then you become a watcher because you want to keep seeing. You can't you can't not look at crazy things. So you probably go only to crazy places to see crazy stuff because you're messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because God didn't want us to see everything.
Right.
Well, they use it for like bank thefts and stuff like that. So like you said, if you can't take your clothes, how do you carry money? I mean, like
we can still see the money.
Yeah, exactly.
So put it down. Like,
and people are like, I would go and break into the CIA building. How?
Yeah.
You're invisible. That doesn't mean you can walk through walls.
Exactly.
Well, that's why I like Jumper. Have you ever seen that movie? That's the one, teleportation. So I think teleportation would be a more usable.
That's a good one.
No, that is a good one.
That's a good one.
You could teleport right out of your clothes, so unless they go with you. So, I mean, I guess.
That's true. There it goes back to the nudity issue. I like teleportation because it's almost like safety for you. Because if plane's crashing, you get to teleport and go to a donut shop.
It's like a memory. Yeah, you can go to a memory.
Yeah.
Or like Dr. Strange in the MCU when he just goes like this and he just walks right.
Yeah.
I would do that.
That's cool.
That's a good one. Y'all got real good ones.
Yeah.
I don't have any. I think having a great credit rating would be my superhero.
Yeah.
Well, what's the worst one then? He said creepy. Go with the worst.
Do you think heat vision would cause headaches? I mean, you see Superman doing heat vision. You got to think, does that?
A lot of energy there.
Yeah, a lot of energy coming out through the eyes. And I would think you would need an Advil or two.
After. Oh man, that's awesome. I was thinking like Gambit for throwing playing cards. Like that's a pretty lame one, I thought. Or like, Swamp Thing or Captain Planet. Like those weren't very good.
It goes back to the logic issue. Gambit, right? So he's an X-Men for our viewers out there. Yeah. So he could like basically make atomic anything he touches and throws it.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. They never explain how he got so good at throwing these cards.
Yeah.
So sure, you can turn into a fireball. How do you get an ace of spades to go from here way over across the street?
I can't even get a regular Frisbee to do that. Again, that would be a useless superpower for me.
Exactly.
I feel like there's a sermon illustration. You can have all the superpowers. You don't know how to use them, though.
Yeah, that is a sermon illustration. I don't know. I think mine would be... I would want to be Professor Xavier, but I can still walk. So like he can move stuff with his mind, and he can make people do something different than they want to do. But I ain't trying to not be able to walk though. That's a bad trade off. I'd rather fly slow.
Did he have? Did he have to exchange?
Yeah,
like his walking for
exactly.
But why?
Because his power was only so much to make him walk, or like he was using too much power to make him walk. So he had to give that up so he can use his powers.
So he can use his mind.
See, if I was Professor Xavier, I'd tell the script writers, listen, you need to make the cost a little bit less than this. Like, maybe the cost is an in-law or an acquaintance, or maybe that certain church member,
or a scar on your face,
or a scar.
I'm with you there.
Yeah, because I mean,
with you.
That you could, if one day you decide to become the villain, you've got a scar ready.
Yep. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
Those are good. I like that.
Who fixed the world on that?
Yeah,
unless we're flying slow.
We're going nowhere.
Imagine somebody up in
I tell you, that was funny though.
That's just hovering.
They're just like,
that's amazing.
You're like, that's a special superhero.
Yeah, no one would be impressed. They'd just be like, what you doing?
I can float.
Get down from there.
I can float. You're like a human balloon.
Yeah. You're a hot air balloon. You're a hot air balloon. That's all you are. And you ain't got strength, so you can't take nobody with you.
No, totally. And if you go all the way up there, number one, you're still going to be cold. But you're not going to outrun a plane. So if a plane hits you when you're up there,
like if you get in the planes path, what you gonna do? Oh no!
Yeah. It's like, dog paddle. Yeah, just kidding.
You would probably fall faster than you could fly, but you can't fall because you're flying. So you're in trouble.
Okay, we haven't asked the first question. My cheeks are.
These are great questions.
Yeah, these are good.
This could be the whole podcast here.
Yeah, I think it might be. Well, let's jump right in. So, maybe, Caleb, before we jump into some of the LGBTQ conversation, maybe you could give us a little flyover of some of your background.
A little slow flyover.
Yeah, a slow flyover. That's a perfect segment. Oh, I love it. Oh, that was good. That was the choice words right there.
Y'all, we're going to get to the podcast. I promise y'all. I promise. Whoever up there listed, stay with us. Stay with us. We're good friends here.
Oh, this is good. Hey, we're keeping it fun. So
we are.
That's what we're here for. So,
Amen.
But yeah, some of your experiences, upbringing, kind of what set the stage for where you're at today and gave you the passion for this particular area.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah. So I'm originally from Missouri and Kansas City, and my parents were both professors in Columbia, Missouri. When I was 2, they divorced. They both went into same-sex relationships. So my dad was never with a partner. He had friends. My mom was in a 22-year monogamous relationship with a woman named Vera, and they moved to Kansas City. They were joined the local regional board of directors for GLAAD. When I was growing up, they took me with them to bars and campouts and pride parades, and I just saw a lot of the ugliness of Christians holding up signs saying God hates you, throwing water and urine on people. And I just thought to myself, man, I never want to be a Christian, because Christians, if they're that bad, how much more? How much worse is Jesus?
Wow.
And I saw my mom's friends die from AIDS, and their families didn't want to talk to them. And I would say, why are they acting like that? Why are their families not hugging them? And I get it. It was the 80s. We didn't know a lot about it, but that's still your child that's dying right there. There's nothing you can do. I don't know if you've ever seen somebody die from AIDS. It's awful. But I remember my mom told me one time, well, Caleb, those are Christians, and Christians hate gay people. If you are not like them, they will not like you. And so I hated Christians. Then I was 16. I got invited by a Christian in my high school to attend a Bible study he was leading for Christians. And I went there, and I had never owned a Bible before, so I grabbed one of my dad's old Bibles and went there. And I found out that Jesus was not like what I imagined, that he was very different from some of the interactions that I had had with people. That he had very real expectations of his followers for how they should live and believe and treat people. But he also, I think as Pastor Andy Stanley says, Jesus liked people who were nothing like him, and they liked him back.
Yeah.
And he loved people who were in the margins and people that the religious elite of the day would have nothing to do with. And I was like, man, I love that. And I ended up studying what the Bible has to say about sexuality. And I came to 2 conclusions I hold today. God created sex to be expressed in a marriage between a male and a female, but our biblical beliefs are never a basis to sideline anyone, push them away, act indifferently towards, or anything else. Then I wanted to be a pastor. I was at a CIY event, Christ in Youth, when I was 16, and so I called my friend Greg. I'd been going to his dad's church on Sunday nights, and this one morning I woke up and I said, Greg, I think I've turned Christian. I don't know what to do. And he said, well, let's go eat Chinese food and I'll baptize you. So I think that was in Acts 2. We had Chinese food. He walked through the Roman road with me. Remember the old Roman road where it took you through all the verses? And then I got baptized, and I went home and told my parents, and they kicked me out for a while. And eventually they let me back in, and went to Bible college in Southern Missouri. Have you guys ever been to Southern Missouri?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I go every now and then, but
is that where is it Lampert's or
where they throw the rolls?
Throwed rolls.
Yeah, Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah, we're gonna have to explain all this to these California guys.
Yeah, literally the servers, they have the best rolls, but they're huge.
The best okra.
And the best okra. You say, hey, I want a roll, and they toss it to you from the other side of the restaurant. Like, that's what they do. And it's
yeast rolls with immersed in butter. They're delicious.
Oh, they're delicious, but it's amazing when they just nail somebody right in the head.
Yeah, happens every time you visit.
Yeah, and it's expected, but it's funny when it's not you,
Yeah.
and it's even funny when it's you if you have a good sense of humor.
Yeah.
But I went to Bible college and moved out to Southern California to work at Shepherd Church, where I'm on staff now, and then I was in Dallas, Texas for 3.5 years because we all have to live in purgatory at some point. And while I was there, my mom's partner had died earlier from cancer. They were together for 22 years. My mom and dad moved closer to our family in Dallas, and then they started attending our church. And even though they knew what I believed, and the church treated them well, and they became Christians at the ages of 69, 70. And they both went to be with the Lord in the last year, but you know what? They're with the Lord. They're standing,
Amen.
and throwing the Lamb. Whenever I hear a worship song, I think that's what they're doing right now.
So good.
So that's my story.
So good, Caleb.
Oh,
wow.
Man. That's powerful. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, maybe you could start a little bit too, or we've already started, but maybe you could educate us a little on some of the important details in language to help familiarize some of our listeners with this conversation. Just talking about what does LGBTQ stand for, terms like cisgender, non-binary, things like that. I don't know, things that you think might be important for some of our listeners to know if they're not familiar with that. Yeah,
so LGBTQ plus, or you'll see it in other forms, LGBTQIA plus, or so on and so forth. That's an acronym for different sexual and also gender minorities. So you have just the plus is there because there are actually, like, I think 25 or more letters, and more letters keep on getting added all the time. And so the initial first like 5 or 4 or 5 are probably the most representative. So you have lesbian, you have gay, which is for gay men. Then you have bisexual, people that are attracted to both men and women. Then you have T for transgender, somebody who expresses their gender identity, the way they perceive themselves, how they present themselves in terms of gender, how they interact with others in society. They present themselves opposite from their biological sex. And then you have the Q, which some people... There's 2 Qs in the longer acronym, but some people say that the Q stands for questioning, people who are unsure. There are other people that say that the Q will stand for queer, that has taken on several meanings over the years. Right now, it has to do with more political ideology than anything else. And then the plus represents everything else. Cisgender is when you feel no misalignment. You feel complete alignment between your biological sex, or what some people call your sex at birth, and your gender identity. But yet, if somebody experiences gender dysphoria, that's where they feel a misalignment between their gender identity and their biological sex. And Christians will ask me, do you think that that's true? That's real? And I absolutely do. I think it is, because I think sin has wrecked every part of who we are, and there are people that suffer with that. And then the last one you mentioned, non-binary, is when somebody feels like when it comes to their gender, they are neither male nor female. So they try to express themselves in neutral ways.
Okay. You said that was you had another term for that. That was gender fluid, right?
Gender fluid is different than non-binary. Gender fluid is when somebody kind of goes back and forth between male and female.
Oh, yeah.
Or they might feel like they're a combination. It's a bit subjective, but it kind of has that idea of movement across this, what you would or would not call a spectrum, depending on your view.
Nuance, Caleb, for us, gender fluidity and intersex, which is a word I tend to read more often. I don't know what it is, but gender fluidity and intersex, is that the same thing? Is it nuanced? Is it different?
So intersex, intersex is where somebody is born with both male and female characteristics, specifically usually genitalia, but then also it has to do with chromosomal disorders. 1 in every 3,000 babies, a lot of studies have shown, are born intersex. But usually by the time the child is 1, the body has taken care of itself, But then there are times when it doesn't. And the parents usually, to some degree, have to choose. Because, and that's rare, actually, that it would be that close together, but it does happen. And one more thing about gender dysphoria, a lot of studies have shown that when kids experience gender dysphoria, 90% of the time, studies have shown 90% of the time, gender dysphoria will resolve itself by the time they're 18.
Oh, wow.
So 9 out of 10 kids will not be struggling with that by the time they're 18.
Oh, wow.
So if they are.
Yeah. So some of the work that's being done then, or the stuff that's taking place with some of our younger adults and stuff, potentially could resolve itself if we weren't addressing it so soon, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But there's concern about suicidality of LGBTQ youth, and that is very much a concern. It's very much a reality. But along with that, my personal belief is you also do have organizations and ideologies that will take advantage of situations to monetize on them.
Oh, wow.
And I'm not by any means saying that everybody within that field does that. Yeah. But there is very much that presence, as there is in any form of work or help or human service organization or system.
Yeah, we'll touch a little bit more on that. I'd love to hear more about that, because there's, I think that'll be helpful to some of our listeners out there with younger kids and, who are going through that. We could have some helpful conversation around that. But what's your take real quick on gender pronoun etiquette for gender identities, or what I've heard now is some call pronoun charity in some evangelical circles. So that's going around a lot. I even hear that with my daughter and some stuff,
Yeah.
The she, he, him, she, her, they, them, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Good. Well, what's really interesting is probably about 10 years ago, when a lot of the pronoun things started coming to the forefront of this conversation, there were multiple forms of pronouns, like Z's, or if you remember some of that.
I remember that. Yeah. I knew I had a friend that was a Zer. It had a Z in it. I remember that.
Yeah. There were. I have a whole listing of like 10, and I'm just looking at it thinking, this is not going to last because it's not sustainable. People are not going to remember. Yeah. I had a friend like that too. So in my phone, I put their pronouns by their last name so I would remember. But because that was important to them. But here's I can only give you my opinion on pronoun etiquette.
Yeah.
When it comes to an unsaved, unbelieving adult, I am more likely to use that person's pronouns. When it comes to a student, I am less likely to use that pronoun.
Yeah.
And that's after probably about 2 years ago. If you would have asked me that question, I would have said the same about the students. I'm more likely to use it. Now I'm more likely not to use it, and probably go out of my way not to use a pronoun. And here's the reason why. Because I think that our students are on the front line of this within culture, whether it's schooling at any level, whether it's what they're watching, what they're listening to, some of their favorite influencers on social media. I really believe that it is part of our responsibility to help people not only acknowledge their perspective, yes, but also help them to embrace reality as well. Yeah. And I don't want to unintentionally add to any kind of confusion that this might be causing. Because at the end of the day, my role in all of this, I was talking with the student team here at Southwest just a moment ago, and I told them I don't look at my role as trying to discover a silver bullet to resolve everything with sexual orientation or gender identity. The only reason why I do what I do is because it has become an obstacle to people following Jesus. And so I want to help to lead people, to help them navigate some of these murky waters and landmines so that people can not have obstacles as they go to Jesus. Like John the Baptist said, make straight pave the way for the Lord. I want to be able to do that. And that's why I care about this, because I care about people, and I don't want it to become an obstacle to them understanding how much God loves them.
Yeah, that's so good. Any thoughts on that, Ricky?
Well, I love the distinction between, in many ways, honoring someone who's an adult, who hopefully has had some level of thought to go into why they're making the decisions that they've made about their gender identity, even if it's something we would disagree with. But the word is not co-opting, but it is showing them a certain level of honor and respect for the ultimate purpose of pointing them to hope and faith in Jesus Christ. And I love nuancing that with kids and just being some sense of a standard for a 14-year-old whose brain is literally still growing. Yeah. Right. So I think that's real helpful for our people. The thing I would say too, and maybe CJ, you can beg this question to Caleb. I think people listening need to be reminded about something we stressed several weeks ago, when we basically made the point: don't let the what's going on in the media shape how you show up in your neighborhood. And I forget how we said it.
Your meetings, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes Christians will hear these conversations and only imagine what's happening in the echo chambers of culture and what they see on their Twitter feed and what they see on the news, and not what they see going on next door. Yeah. And so I think sometimes we approach the conversation with such animosity because of what we've seen from, angry newscasters and angry pundits on social media. And we forget that, man, even at a church like Southwest, we got kids with gender dysphoria right now. We have to make hard conversations, or we have to make hard decisions and have hard conversations every student camp. So this is something that's real and right now. And ultimately, we want to win people to the Lord. And even if they're going to struggle with gender identity for the rest of their life, we want to struggle while they take up their cross, while we take up our crosses in our areas of our life. So I think that's really helpful for the purpose of winning them over, for the purpose of pointing them to Jesus, and not bringing that animosity we have about what's going on, big picture and culture, with what's going on right now in our neighborhood. I think it's a real important aspect that you made there, Caleb. So,
well, thanks, man. I agree with you 100%. And it's amazing how, I don't go on Twitter that much anymore, or X. What are we calling it now? I don't know what we call it.
Twitter X.
It's X.
Twitter X. We just call it X Twitter.
X Twitter. There you go. X Twitter.
It's my ex. I'm dating somebody else now.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I look at Twitter as a dumpster fire in the backwoods of West Virginia at midnight.
That's right. That's right. Thanks for not using Mississippi. Yeah.
No, we love Mississippi. It's West Virginia.
Amen. Yeah, they're the worst.
Yeah, absolutely. They're like Rhode Island. Why are you even a state? Too small. So yeah, I because it just seems like everything on that social media site is designed to get a reaction out of you.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why I like Instagram. It does not do the same.
Yeah.
But everything on that site, every news little clip on YouTube is clickbait. Like, we are addicted to outrage porn.
Yeah, that's right.
Right now.
That's right.
Because that sells.
It sells. I saw, I think Carey Nieuwhof did this interview a couple years ago with some kind of surveyist, or anyways, he does surveys and studies and data. And he did this 2-3 year long study with 3,000 people on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it was, right? And he determined that 5% or 10%, 100%, anyways, a large majority of what you see on social media is directed towards the polar opposite 5% of population. Yeah. And that you and I, as normal people, are just couched in the middle. So our middle, moderate, conservative, biblical, whatever you want to call it, our sentiments are left out of social media because they're trying to titillate the most furthest left or the furthest right in order to use a political ideal, or the most liberal or conservative, whatever you want to call it, right? But we basically, when we turn on our phones, we're only watching, to your point, Caleb, the most angering, the most extreme, the most grotesque expressions of what's going on out there as possible. I don't ever see people just walking a dog and saying hi. It's just not there.
Yeah, because it's designed to elicit that response. So I find myself, reading something, and then I'm like, oh, I can't believe that. And I want to respond to them. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna look into this more before I say something because, and then you read more and it's like, it's there. And it's like, it's so easy because like those of us in the middle, like what you said, Ricky, we're the majority, but we don't sell. But you know, we get swept up in the minority extremist viewpoints on both sides.
Yes. Well, I think like one of the challenges for me is I've been studying this stuff, reading this book, getting Caleb out here to talk to our team so we can learn even more. Like when I think about LGBTQ+, when I think about gender stuff, you know, there are things that anger me. And I think there's a lot of people listening now who are very angry. And if you're not angry, you're scared. Like when I think about the world my 3 children are going into, there's a lot of fear that it evokes in me. And I'm angry that several biological males in different beauty pageants have won Most Beautiful Woman or Woman of the Year. I'm angry that this girl named Riley, who's a swimmer, who's become this advocate. And I think she's great. I think she's right saying, hey, you know, this brother who's got this different gender identity, so be it, free country. At the same time, does he get to now with that male body break every record? You know, and so the injustices make me angry. At the same time, though, if I'm at my coffee shop this morning and a biological male who identifies as a female with a tank top on and high heels sits down next to me, I am not going to be sitting up angry saying, how dare you and your people do all the I'm not going to show up. And so that's my point. I think I'm praying that the Holy Spirit will help me to show up for the issue like I would show up for the person if I bumped into him at church today. And I think that's what culture needs from the church is more of that kind of posture, because anger ain't gonna work.
No.
You know, it's just not gonna work.
No, because what we do when we do that, when we get mad at that person in Starbucks, that transgender individual who is probably a really great person, you know? What is it Plato said? Be kind because everybody you see is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And then all of a sudden we get mad at them publicly and it's going to go viral because now you're part of the extreme. But you get mad at them and you've just committed a logical fallacy. You've just done a broad sweep. You've made them into a scarecrow argument where you see them as personifying everything you don't like about this ideology. And that's why I think it's important for us today to distinguish between people and ideas.
Okay.
Because I don't believe that the average we've got to move ahead of society by distinguishing between people and ideas, because right now society doesn't. They see every idea as a person.
I was reading Genesis of Gender by Faval, I think is her name. She's a English professor, but studied on feminist studies, grew up in typical evangelical, you know, kind of expression of faith, but really wanted to study feminism and kind of distances herself from her faith somewhat, but that was never anti-Christian, right? Studies gender forever, or not gender, but femininity forever, but starts realizing kind of like the if you will, the circular logical holes in feminism and how it seems to end up, the further you go down the feminist lane, and there's different expressions of it, the further you go towards hatred of women, right? Like women have to co-opt masculine or traditionally masculine norms to get it in the world. And her point is it ends up becoming this thing about power, not about really truth and who I am. I'm just oppressed and I want to break free. So anyways, that's the book. But my point is, she has an experience with Christ, renews her commitment to Jesus, and now realizes she has to undo what she's allowed for the last 10 years. And she wrote this wonderful book, Genesis of Gender. And my question to you, Caleb, is this. She basically is saying with all this cisgender and non-binary and gender, all this stuff, that on some level it has something to do with power and identity and affirming, right? All that kind of stuff. With what you're seeing out there, especially for young, because you told us that the fastest growing gender dysphoria issues are amongst women and then middle school females, many of whom are increasingly Hispanic. Bro, when you said it, all I was thinking about was that power dynamic, because I bet a woman would feel more powerless in the culture. I bet a person of color will feel more powerless in the culture. Do you see any kind of connection between gender identity and fluidity and all the things going on with gender and LGBTQ plus with something to do with, man, I'm trying to compensate for powerlessness?
100%. And so I'll prove it to you right here.
Okay.
Why is it in news media and entertainment that we primarily hear about trans women, men who have transitioned their gender to women, but we don't hear about trans men as much? Women who have transitioned to men. Why is that? Because almost every story that you hear, I'm not saying every, but almost a majority of the stories are about men who have transitioned to be women. And so, but if I were to look at it, it would be multiple about trans women and very few about trans men. And I think it's interesting that you have the focus on biological men once again. And I think it is about power, even if people don't realize it. I mean, even if they're just participating in the system and they don't realize it, it is. I mean, when you think about Title IX, for instance, and sports, Title IX, part of the reason why it was created was so there could be fair and equitable competition. You know, that women could have that. And men could have that. And you see a lot of that becoming undone now.
That's right.
But you also see society reacting back towards it. Like Leah Thomas has been banned from competing. You see more and more sports within the Olympics and other places that are getting banned. So that's why I say that there is a reaction. But at the same time, I see that. And I still think it goes back to, you know, the struggle between men and women. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of feminists from my mom's day, you know, are reacting. And I'll say one more thing. Here's what's interesting, CJ and Ricky. So back in the 80s and 90s, when my mom and her partner would go to activist events, would organize them for GLAAD and everything, they were, you know, pushing for gay rights, but also equal treatment for women, equal opportunities for women, equal payment for women. And so what they were doing was paired with something else. When you look at the trans activism of today, it is not paired with anything else but self. What Carl Truman in his books, Strange New World and Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, calls expressive individualism. In other words, I get my validation from what you think of me. And so you have to acclimate to what I want. And here's how that breaks down is that if that is the case, what about when that person has to acclimate to what somebody else wants? And because that person gets their validation from that person. And eventually the whole ideology eats itself.
That's right.
But I look at it, and the whole trans activism is not like the activism in the 80s and 90s. It was paired with something else that in their mind would make society better. I'm not making a comment on it. I'm just saying that's their thinking. But this is purely self-focused.
Which is why the goalposts keep moving, right? And it's why there's more, you know, alternative, or I think that is the word, alternative expressions of sexuality, I think, are birthing. And I think the smartphones kind of proliferate that, make it way more like pansexuals becoming quickly normal, right? I read a book that talked about how cisgender Black, professionally, basically was saying cisgender, which is a normal Black dude, okay, I hate to use that language, but who has a job is the white guy in urban space. Right? Like, what the crap is that? Does that even mean?
Right.
But my point is, everything keeps moving. Nothing's settled, because I think that expressive individualism is run amok, is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
And I feel like, Tim Keller said this on a podcast. I heard this the other day, and he basically said, for the postmodern moment, they're relativists, and relativists get to say, this is what it means to me, and this is the choice I'm going to make because this is what's comfortable for me. And he's basically said identity is performative, but when we come to the gospel, identity is received. Identity is not what I do, what I say about myself, what you say of me, what you think of me. Identity is I'm a son or I'm a daughter of Jesus Christ, and in him I have security and peace and rest. And I feel like that's the golden nugget that's the opportunity for the church, is to be able to say, yep, I hear you. I respect you. I hear what you're saying. Let me talk to you about a goalpost that'll never move.
100%.
And that's hearing that you've been forgiven of your sins and washed and cleansed, and you'll always be accepted and always be loved.
Well, there's your control right there, is that if identity is received and it's not achieved is me.
Yes.
Received is identity is from God.
That's exactly right.
And so I don't want that.
Yes.
I want to do it on my own.
That's right.
Because if it's me, then I make up the rules.
That's right.
And so that's where we're redefining everything. I mean, love is bottomless. Basically, the idea, like you were saying too, is like that most people, you don't you say that you love me as a Christian, but you actually don't really love me unless you accept all that I am, including sexuality and values. And all. It's really hard to express that, for a lot of people.
And there can be no disagreement. And that's why I tell people all the time that you cannot build everybody has a primary identity. You cannot build your primary identity on something that is broken. And guess what? Everything in your life is broken. Everything in the world is. Everything in the person that you admire most and you get your validation from is broken. So eventually it'll crumble. But when you place your identity in Christ, you do not have to fight for it anymore. He protects it. And you become an ordinary person through which God can do extraordinary things.
Well, for people listening, does this not then, to some extent, direct our approach to that person in our life, that kid who's a boy who wants to be a girl, and you're going through that season? A lot of people listening have a friend or have kids who have friends at school that are going through this. You just don't know what to say to them. But if it does have something, some is just pure gender dysphoria. You got some mental stuff happening, and we need to just come alongside you and faithfully get you some help and pray for you. But for those for whom it's kind of like, man, there's some kind of connection to power. I feel powerless. Here's a group. Here's a tribe. Here's an expression that seems to get me out of the weight of the powerlessness, the rejection I feel, right? Does this not help mom to talk to that 14-year-old girl? Because if it's about power, if it's about security, you know the one with all power. You know the one with all security. And you get to faithfully, if you know it's about that, because parents listening right now, grandparents, the job is not to make them binary. And the job is not to make them heterosexual. The job is to point them lovingly, faithfully, graciously to Jesus Christ. I declare, you catch the fish, Jesus will clean it. And so, or he'll work on it for the rest of our lives. So that's my point. If it has something to do with power, then I know now what the heart of the soul of this kid needs to hear. Maybe, I need to talk about gender. I need to read Caleb's book. I need to watch some articles. But more so, I need to talk about, you know what? I remember feeling what you feel. It was different. It didn't look like gender. It didn't look like LGBTQ plus, but it did look like, I remember not having any friends or whatever, and relating, but then saying, hey, but Jesus is all power. Am I making any sense?
No,
but it gives me a missiology for people in my life.
It comes back, I think, to the concept of surrender. Paul asked God to remove that thorn 3 times, and God said, no, my grace is sufficient for you.
That's right.
My power is made perfect in your weakness. And it's like, one of my favorite stories that just sticks with me all the time is Jacob wrestling with God in the desert. And I think that story, because when God, when God wrenches his hip socket out, and he's holding on to God, God says, let me go. It's almost daybreak. I've had people say, well, is he like a vampire? Is he like... I'm like, no, he's not a Cullen. He's not going to sparkle in the sunlight like in Twilight. That's not what God does. But I think what God is saying, he's kind of mocking him. He's like, hey, your brother Esau's coming. You got to figure it out, though. Jacob spent his whole life trying to bargain and negotiate. His name means liar and bargainer. That's right. But I think in that moment, when Jacob says, I will not let you go until you bless me, he's not demanding it. He's surrendering. For the first time, he's saying, I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. And I think, isn't that what sanctification is about, Ricky?
I think it is. How about this tie back? Because I about shouted over here. And then I won't let you go till you bless me. And in that moment of surrendering to God, he now learns that the blessing is not you giving me what I want. The blessing is you securing who I am.
And your presence.
Because he gets ready to go to the meeting with Esau. fully ready to die and was okay with it.
Because
to the point where Jacob divides his family, because it's like, if Esau take me out, at least my family will survive. Jacob had settled that what I really thought I wanted is not what I ultimately needed.
Yeah.
What I needed was the relationship.
Yes.
That would give me peace and not make me believe that I need an idol of surviving and winning to be my identity. Because that goalpost has moved for the last 40 years of my life. But I met a man that I wrestled with, and now my identity don't move anymore. And just, and I just love that tie back. And here God always gives a reminder of the blessing after he moves. So, okay, move through the Jordan. Okay, now put 12 stones down. When your kids come, tell them that I parted the Jordan and all this stuff. Noah, I destroyed the earth. I ain't gonna do it no more. Here's a promise. Here's a rainbow. Jacob, here's a limp.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, man.
Limp forever. Every time you walk, you're reminded that it wasn't about your walking.
Yeah.
But it was now reverent. I'm saying this to put this in English for everybody who's listening and like, what in the world is going on? I am saying that regardless of the vice, the struggle, the dysphoria, the mental instability, the lie that person in your life or you are believing, at the end of the day, Satan is trying to block you from getting to the peace of Christ that surpasses understanding.
100%.
That will guard your heart and mind through Christ Jesus. And there are some in our church, CJ, who would identify as gay, but they love Jesus, they love the Bible, they practice celibacy, right? And they will limp for the rest of their life. And in the spirit of Luke 9, will deny themselves for the rest of their life and carry their cross for his sake. How can they do that? How can they sexually deny themselves? Because Christ had to deny ourselves. And there's things in you, CJ, that you have to deny. There's things in me that I have to deny. There's things in you that I have to deny. And so God calls all of us to lay down the things that the world makes so important, to make Jesus everything, and he gives us our peace.
Can I say something about that real quick? I'm piggybacking.
I'm about to shout.
And by the way, Southwest people, this is going to be a future sermon. I can feel it. Sometime in the near future, the next year or two, you're going to hear about Jacob. You're going to think about this. You're like, oh yeah, I remember that. And then you're going to hear stomping too. And Ricky's going to walk off stage with a limp.
I should walk on with crutches.
There you go. There you go. I can see it already. Beautiful. So I want to go off something what you said about, people are asking how can gay people, lesbian people who are sexually diverse, how can they commit to celibacy? That just seems so foreign. Even to Christians, it seems foreign. And I think a lot of that, understanding the fault of that, including my own, belongs to me. It belongs to society. But to some degree, it belongs to Christians too. And it's in our society, we have so elevated, when you think of C.S. Lewis's Four Loves, we have elevated eros. But eros is not by any means the strongest love. It's agape.
That's right.
And even phileo.
That's right.
Friendly, brotherly love can be stronger, and strage, parental love. But it's so funny. We spend all of our time in society talking about eros. And we spend in the church so much time reacting to society talking about that we talk so much about marriage, and we hardly ever talk about singleness, even though Jesus was single and a lot of the leaders. But here's the interesting thing. Eros and marriage won't even be in heaven.
That's right.
And yet we talk so much about it. And there are some people ask why want to be in heaven. And I'm like, well, just like how when Jesus died on the cross, like animal sacrifices were set up to get us to understand Jesus' death for us in our place. And when he died on the cross, there was no longer any need for that because it had been fulfilled. Our marriage ultimately is designed to point to Jesus' relationship with the church and God. One day there will be the ultimate marriage in heaven, right? And there will be no longer any need for marriage when we get up there, because you'll have the church and Jesus together. But we spend so much time talking about these things they're not even going to be. Marriage is important, but I'm just saying.
It's a temporary institution.
It's temporary. And we should be investing more in phileo, strage, and agape.
So good.
We can't, I don't think we can grasp, though, the idea of not having that need, that God could fulfill all of that, what that would actually look like. Because we talk a lot about my needs being met. That's a lot of what culture is today. So I think even in Christian community, we almost ultimately always go back to self and need. And so to think about that holistic fulfillment that God can be all in all and everything to us, I think is a really hard concept to even grasp.
It's a hard concept. And if I could grasp heaven, I wouldn't want to go.
Yeah.
And so the fact that I can't imagine it'll be that good makes it that much better. And I would say to those struggling with that marriage is not going away. Right. Marriage as you know it is going away.
Right.
We will be married to him because that was the whole institution's point, to Caleb's point, was to show his love, his commitment, our faithfulness to him. So old folks said this back in the day. Somebody dies and they go to heaven, and you're just lamenting. I just wish he could come back. I just wish he could come back. And I always say, he wouldn't come back if he could. Heaven. You go see 1 second of heaven, you're gonna be like, oh no, cool, I'll stay. Yep. No, I'm good. No. Lord, tell him to stop. Stop telling him to revive me. Don't tell him to do CPR. Heaven's gonna be amazing.
No, that's how I feel when I go to Taco Bell. Yeah. I love Taco Bell. When I walk in there,
are you serious?
Oh, I love Taco Bell.
Yeah. I do love it.
Do you feel like that walking out?
What?
Do you feel like that walking out or just walking in?
Well, 3 hours later. No, that's White Castle.
Ooh, White Castle. That's like taking a laxative.
No, yeah, I forgot why they called them belly bombers until a few years ago when I was in Chicago. But
there's a reason they call them sliders.
Yeah.
I've already gotten so many emails about our podcast being a boys club.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, are we going to act like women don't fart or
they love it.
Or they don't look? I've seen plenty of women eat of all shapes and sizes, and I've seen them throw down nasty food. So don't even, So I will say this: I heard this great sermon illustration from Tony Evans one time. He's like, people being in love with earth over heaven is like taking my kids to a jump house in somebody's backyard, and they love the jump house, but I'm like, hey, we got to leave and go to Disneyland. And they're like, no, I just want to stay in the jump house. And he's like, no, you have no idea. Disneyland's better. They're like, no, I want to stay.
Yeah.
So and when we get there, I'm going to want to go back. That's what I think of earth and heaven, right?
Man.
Hopefully we don't have the lines, or at least a fast pass when we get to heaven, but...
Such a good analogy.
I think, for everybody listening, Caleb's with us for a couple of days and here at a church, and he's coming back in a couple of weeks. And one of the things we all resonated deeply with, because it was overwhelming and it needed to be, because Caleb just exposed, hey, this is what's happening. Here are the latest trends. Here are the newest categories. This is what this means. And we were feeling the weight of that as pastors. But then we all kind of came together as this is why theology is so important. For the person listening, for whom the conversations and the laws are being written, and just the trends and the Budweiser boycotts and all the things are so disruptive. Remember your theology. God was surprised by nothing that's happened in the last 3 years. God is in control. God is on the throne. And Solomon said that there's nothing new under the sun. It may be new to us. It is not new to God. It is not his first rodeo. And he's going to help us navigate the faith in this moment, as he has through every moment in all history. And I think one of the things we said today was, it may not mean we get to relax, but it still means we get to rest because God is in control. So I just want to encourage some folks with that before we get out of here, CJ.
Well, I want to circle back around real quick with a question about suicidality, especially for some of our parents. We talked about that a little bit, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. But I'm going to read some stats from the trevorproject.org. It's a support website for LGBTQ youth, and then ask you guys to respond based on the statements and findings. But statistics state that 41% of LGBTQ young people seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, including half of transgender and non-binary young people, and nearly 3 in 10 cisgender young people. 14% of LGBTQ young people attempted suicide in the past year, and including nearly 1 in 5 transgender and non-binary young people, and nearly 1 in 10 cisgender young people. And 81% wanted mental health care due to anxiety or depression. So there seems to be a major narrative or theme currently toward the connection between LGBTQ affirmation for youth in homeschool, state, and government policies, and a correlation between their mental health and physical well-being. Information states that LGBTQ young are not inherently prone to suicide risk because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, but rather placed at higher risk because of how they are mistreated and stigmatized in society. So how do we remain proactive but still sensitive to this as we live in the tension between truth and grace? A lot there. Sorry.
You want me to?
Yes. Yeah. You the expert.
Yeah, you started.
I don't know if I'm the expert, but no, I believe a lot of those stats are true, and I think that what is interesting, and I have to email this to you guys. You can take a look, but the Williams Institute, which deals with suicidality, partners with the UCLA Anderson School of Management, and they put out different stats on LGBTQ youth, and also LGBTQ stats by race and ethnicity, location within the world, but also within the U.S. Yeah. So it's interesting to see how those stats are differentiated in the different areas of the U.S. And I have noticed, I don't have any, I can't remember the firm stats, but I do remember seeing that when you look at a lot of it in blue states and red states, there's not a ton of difference in the stats. So the idea that all these different policies that kind of shift around society, or some of the things that will make parents uncomfortable, or trying to talk to school boards to, that makes things better. Sometimes it does, but a lot of times it doesn't. And here's what I think really honestly makes things better is, number one, if a student is struggling with suicide ideation, obviously getting them counseling, taking them to a hospital, not in a psych ward, but to a hospital, get it checked out. Maybe it's a chemical issue. I mean, there are so many parents that don't even take their kids to the doctor, to get checked out. They could be struggling with depression as well. And a lot of students do not share with their parents and with others. Some of it might be because of bullying, but it's also, there's a stigma out there that they're told by their friends that if they do share, they're going to be in trouble. When in actuality, I think the average parent in America, and I could be wrong, but I think the average parent in America is honestly trying to do their best with what they have in the moment.
Sure.
And the understanding they have in the moment. So I think that also misleads students as well. But I do believe these stats are real, and I do believe there needs to be intentionality. Unfortunately, we were talking about the extreme left and right. Both will utilize these stats as weapons against the other.
Yeah, sure.
And unfortunately, these stats have also been used to gaslight a lot of well-intentioned, well-meaning, and loving parents into falling in line with what society says with different decisions. And so I think how do we respond? Lots of prayer, lots of listening, little talking, and trying to help, individuals to get help.
That's good. Yeah, that's really helpful. Well, we know
so good.
We know that we can't just stand by as a church on the sidelines as these things progress in the world around us. So how do you guys think that the church is doing in this area, and what are some of the ways that we made progress and some of the areas that we still have a ways to go?
We are, obviously speaking of Big C Church, right? I don't feel dismayed like I would have 2, 3, 5 years ago. I don't feel like I have freedom to say, oh man, the church is just so behind on all this kind of stuff. I feel like the Church of Jesus Christ in the West is starting to kind of awaken as more and more people fall slave to these issues and these decisions and these lifestyles. Caleb, you said it better, that it becomes their problem when it becomes personal. Or something to the effect. You basically said people start to care more and get more engaged when it affects home, right? And I think increasingly more of us just have that cousin or that daughter or that kid's best friend at school who's going through something with regards to this conversation. So I feel like that's happening in the church, which like we're doing this trending series and everybody wants to just learn who are we, what do we believe, what am I supposed to do? Because I think that means that the problem is home. So I'm a little encouraged by that. And I know this is going to sound a little masochistic. I don't know what the word is, but sadistic, whatever. Anyways, it's not going anywhere and it's going to get worse. And Christ historically has always used trouble and disruption to wake up his church to do what he called and created them to do. 100%. We are not effective when we're comfortable. When we are uncomfortable, we are effective. And I'm going to steal from a sermon coming up in a couple of weeks where this cardinal, Catholic cardinal, died out of Chicago. And I'm going to botch the quote, but basically he's on his deathbed. He does one more interview. And the journalist basically says, statistics are church attendance so far down and missionaries are, recruiting is so far down. Basically, she was making the case that Christianity is not working out. It is, every number is down. And he says, but it seems like culture is getting so much more virulent and vehement. And, what do you have to say about that? And he says, all I know is that I will die on a hospital bed. He said, my successor will probably die with increasing persecution. His successor will die in a jail cell. And that guy's successor will die as a martyr in the city streets. And all I know is that when the civilization falls apart, the people of Jesus Christ will once again pick up the marred, fragments of society and rebuild it once again.
Amen.
And, again, it sounds like a little, mad, but it's true.
Yeah, it's true.
Jesus will win, and we just got to remain faithful to him.
And it's cyclical.
That's right.
Well, you're that whole thing you're talking about, it keeps on happening.
That's exactly right.
And whereas it might not be happening in this culture, it is happening in other cultures right now that we don't even know about. And Christians are there to pick up the pieces.
Yep. Amen. Amen.
Well, as always, we want to have engaging conversation here, but we want to provide people with helpful resources as well. So let's talk about some of the things out there that can help individuals and organizations better navigate some of these complex topics or even seek professional advice or help. And so,
just a couple of low-hanging fruit. And I love, Caleb, if you just venture out into some big picture resources that are out there for people. If you're listening and you're a fan of Southwest, you watch us online or on campus, just know that we have all sorts of ministries that we bragged on last time. For hurts, hang-ups, and bad habits, we have our Celebrate Recovery ministry, which is a communal expression of the gospel that helps you move from whatever your hurt, hang up, loss is to a place of healing in Christ through Life on Life Community. We meet here every Friday night here at the church. Also, we've got a resource page, southwestchurch.com, about all these conversations. That is some excellent reading, sermons, articles that you can kind of dive into for information's sake. And we will, by way of announcement, be creating some sort of a moment for parents and grandparents at our church. We're inviting Caleb back, and he's basically going to fire off answers to all your questions. How to talk to your kids about gender identity, what to do if you have a kid who identifies as something different than what you expected, what to do if you're LGBTQ, all those sorts of things. And we're going to have a good time to equip parents, and it's going to be exciting. And that's how we're equipping people here locally. Caleb, man, what does this look like for somebody listening who's in, West Virginia? First of all, we're kidding. Your state is beautiful. We love you. Beautiful mountains. But what? Why don't you answer CJ's question from your big picture perspective?
There are so many different people. Well, not so many, but there are increasingly a number of people who are writing on this topic from different perspectives that I think are worth checking out. Jackie Hill Perry is fantastic to check out. Sean McDowell at Biola University, Top of School Theology, has a great podcast, but also a couple podcasts, and then also a YouTube channel where he interviews people with differing perspectives. So I think that's fantastic. Beckett Cook I think has a great YouTube channel, but then also has a great book called A Change of Affection. Sam Allberry has is a fantastic author and has a couple of great books out there. One is called Why Does God Care Who I Sleep With? And then another one is something like A Theology of the Body, or What Does the Bible Say About the Body? Rosaria Butterfield has used to be in a lesbian relationship, was a professor at Syracuse University. Now she's married to a guy who's a pastor, and she wrote a book called Secrets of Unlikely Converts. So,
wow.
Dr. Mark Yarhouse has a good book out there called, he writes with Julia Sandusky, called Emerging Gender Identities. Learning from Today's Youth. Preston Sprinkle has a great book called Embodied. I mean, there are so many good resources out there, an increasing number of resources, honestly. So I would go and check out those as well.
Oh, that's really good. Well, we'll include a lot of those in the show notes, of course, as well as some of the other links that Pastor Ricky talked about. But also, of course, you can go check out some of Caleb's stuff. He's written a book, like we mentioned before, Messy Grace, Messy Truth, and God of Tomorrow. But definitely Messy Grace and Messy Truth are really good reads on some of these topics. And if you want to find out more about Caleb as well, you can check out some of his resources or opportunities to even connect with him. Visit his website, calebkaltenbach.com. And again, we'll also offer some links to some practical stuff to deal with anxiety, depression, suicide prevention.
That's good.
Some links to some resources for that as well. So be sure to check those out in the show notes. And then Ricky and Caleb, any last comments or thoughts before we wrap it up?
This has been a highlight. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I can honestly say part of what made my day today is I never thought about flying slow in the
still
air.
Wrestling with that.
I'm still wrestling with that. Or
I'm floating around in your mind.
Yeah, or floating around. What was it? You had talked about invisibility and how you still get cold. I had never thought about that until you said that.
What are you going to do about that?
Yeah.
It's a thing.
Right. It's not like invisibility like cloaks you from
That's right. The elements.
Yeah, you can't. You're not going to be invisible and say, "Oh, go see what's in Antarctica."
I don't think it's a superpower. I think it's a curse.
Yeah.
If you can be invisible.
Yeah. Except when my wife or Amy gets mad at me, those are times when,
that would be nice.
I mean, if I could call on it when I want it during those times of trouble and oppression.
That's actually a good point. I take it back. Invisibility is still a superpower.
In those moments.
Yeah, okay.
But she can find you pretty easy now, so.
Yeah, she has a sixth sense.
Yeah. Well, anyway, there you guys, there you have it. Thanks again for joining us on another episode of The Other 6 Days. Be sure to hit that subscribe, follow, share, and like, and spread the word. And as always, take what you've heard and turn it into something you can do to further the gospel in the world around you. Until next time.
Base.